Everybody, welcome back to the show. Today we're going to be talking to Jordan. Pronounce your last name for everybody, just so they all know.
It's Leithart. It's German.
Leithart?
Yeah.
Okay. Leithart. Jordan Leithart.
I looked up the translation once. It's hard work is what it translates to.
Hard work. That makes sense. Knowing a little bit about you. That's for sure. We're going to be talking a little bit. So, Jordan, let's get into it just a little bit. When did you first get into game development? Like, what was the draw for you? Like, was there any one thing that you saw that's like, wow, that's a field I definitely want to get into?
Yeah. Way back in 2009 or 10. I don't remember exactly. I was right around there. I was working as a web dev, and I played Dragon Age Origins, and I always play through those RPGs kind of like a very, like my best self, very altruistic, noble, sacrificial, and all that type of thing. And I got through, and so I played Human Noble and went through it and had a great time. And it's the first time I've played a single player game where I've started over again immediately. And so I started playing as a city elf, and the setting of the city elf in Dragon Age is like you are like the elves are the lowest caste in the world, and so you go around, you're in this arranged marriage. So the tutorial's like doing all these errands for this arranged marriage. You get to the marriage, and the lord of the city, who's a human, his son comes by and declares the rite of prima nocte right as you are getting married, and takes your bride away into his castle. And I went through, and I just got married at the time. So like this like feeling of protecting was like just rose up in me.
Yeah.
And so I went out and I murdered every single person in that castle, getting my wife back. And so then you get put with the Grey Wardens, right? But I noticed as I was playing through that I found myself being very racist towards humans for that playthrough. So if there was an opportunity for me to proclaim judgment and kill a human, I would kill the human. And I was like, this is an odd thing, because I just played through as a human, noble, altruistic, and now I'm in this thing, and just this 1.5 hour, 2 hour tutorial section caused me to play through it completely differently. And so I finished, went to work the next day, and I was like, well, I'm a programmer, I can make games. And so I went home, found that game development is very different from web development. I was working in PHP, so I had a little bit of like this object-oriented background. But C++ was, are we allowed to swear on this channel?
Go for it.
Okay, it was a complete mindfuck for me. Like I could not understand it from online tutorials. So I quit, went back to school, and then in 2014, I got my job in the games industry at Carbine Studios.
That's amazing.
Yeah, basically
so we've
been there ever since.
Established right away you hate humans. So
funny enough, I actually just played that game as well. Well, the opening for the City Elf, and then my game kept crashing, so I couldn't get very far.
Oh.
But I was really enjoying what I did play.
It's one of my favorite games.
Yeah, it's excellent. But I could totally see how that would draw you into just like how video games could affect you in certain ways and cause you to act as you otherwise wouldn't act, you know?
Yeah.
I can see that being a big draw in terms of just having that kind of like creativity and creative freedom to do those kind of things. So like early on then, so Dragon Age Origins, that kind of got you interested in it. What were some of your inspirations early on? Was there any developers that you really liked looking at, or not looking at, but any other games that you really like playing, or just
or inspirations outside of gaming?
Yeah. So games wise, I mean, I played, like, we didn't have a console growing up. So I played a whole bunch of the old shareware games, like played a lot of Commander Keen. We had a copy of Civilization 2, which I loved.
Oh yeah.
And so like I was playing, and it's like, so I was playing a lot of that. And then my parents finally relented and we got a Xbox in like 2002 or 2003. And they started noticing I was going over to other friends' house to play Halo, and do the System Link stuff. And so they were like, well, now we have an Xbox, so they can come here. And when it happened, I would just take my Xbox over there and would be one of the System Links. But, you know, but I wouldn't say I became like a gamer until I moved out of the house and I played KOTOR for the first time. So BioWare was like a huge thing. And so I played I was playing D&D with a couple friends. Then a friend of mine introduced me to the Star Wars tabletop RPG. And then we kind of fizzled out on the campaign. And he's like, well, here, you can use my computer and play KOTOR, which is kind of like an RPG in the Star Wars universe. And so I played through that and I was like, oh man, like I remember, is it okay? It's like probably okay to spoil a little bit of like 20-year-old games, right? I'm not planning on getting the big twist.
If people haven't played it by now or looked it up, then, well, timestamp, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. At a certain point, like if you play your cards right, like Bastila confesses her love for you. And I remember walking around the house afterwards, be like, wow, like I didn't expect that to happen. Like I've been buttering her up for 30 hours, but never expected this to happen. And that transitioned into Star Wars Galaxies. And then that transitioned into World of Warcraft. And that's really where I was like spending most of my time playing, was when World of Warcraft came out.
Yeah,
so that was when I kind of became like a gamer.
Yeah, I got sucked into that one too.
Yeah, I think like most of the world did. 2004 November it comes out, and you're just you've especially if you're familiar with the any of Blizzard's IPs, particularly Warcraft, obviously. But being able to play in a world like that just totally blew me away.
It still blows me away.
Yeah.
Like I've gone back and played Classic in 2019, and then they just released a new server. Was it, I think, 2 or 3 months ago? Mm-hmm. And I like every time I go back and I'm like, this is still such a good game every time.
Yeah.
We didn't sink hundreds of hours in there for no reason.
No.
It's one hell of a time capsule going back, and just in terms of game design, just how different it is today compared to back then. Because back then we didn't have social media, we didn't have any of those things.
Yeah.
So we had almost more free time. It's like the world felt like it moved a little bit slower than it does today. And I think a lot of developers, when they make games today, they do take that into account, the ability for people to hold attention to something.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
So
Blizzard was an inspiration, but I read Masters of Doom, and the idea of like 4 or 5 guys getting together in a lake house and just building something amazing was still a dream, and outside, like, honestly, I have to say J.R.R. Tolkien. Like, I read Lord of the Rings like 17 times before I graduated high school. Like, I devoured that over and over again.
All good stuff. Yeah, hearing about some of the old developers, just how things were done back then, like you were saying, like with the Lake House and stuff like that, with id and Doom and everything. And it's just like, it was such a different, like, I imagine the atmosphere is totally different, which we're gonna get into in a little bit. So you originally started out as web developer programming. Mm-hmm. Is that something you went to school for?
Nope.
Nope. You've learned on your own.
Yeah, they were kind enough to train me on the job.
That's good. That's actually really good.
Yeah.
What about when it came to games? Is that something that you took classes in and for like game programming, or did you just jump in like, I don't care how cold the water is, I'm just going?
It was I went and got my computer science degree. So I was living in a small town up in northern Idaho, like 20,000 people, counting the state university students. So like 5,000 permanent residents. So it's like, and I just got married. So my wife and I were like, well, we don't want to live here for the rest of our lives. And I could go to like a Full Sail or like a DigiPen and get a game programming degree, or I could get like a more general degree, understand broader aspects, and that way when I graduate, at the very least, we can, I can find a job and we can leave, kind of thing. So I took computer graphics. All my projects were game related when I could choose them. So I would we took an AI course. We had to do some genetic algorithm learning. And so I was like trying to figure out how to like, can I teach a turret to fire or move, kind of thing. There's like an AI trying to figure out how to do that. And then my last summer, I didn't intern. I just spent the entire summer at home building games literally from scratch. Like, I think I had a graphics library, and then I was like, okay, like building a game basically like from your, like, I started off with Pong, then went to Breakout, and then went into like a zombie top-down shooter, kind of like Oracle of Melee's a little bit. And And then I got stuck on network code when I tried to create a checkers.
Gotcha.
Like network code was not easy for me.
Yeah, I think one of my first projects that I made, it was a calculator, but it actually displayed raster graphics in a window, and it was the background. It was just a background image, but I remember it was stupid. It was David Hasselhoff, and whenever you would hit, put an equation, hit the equal sign, it would say, "Thank you for playing my sexy game." I don't know why I did that. I don't know why. It's just one of those things where I'm like, I'm going to throw this away eventually. Why not make it dumb and fun? So I'm weird. Whatever. So when you took some of those classes and stuff like that, how important do you think those were in terms of helping you early on before you moved it? Very?
Yeah. One of the classes, so they had a couple weed out classes at my university, University of Idaho. And it was like computer science 121 when we talked about data structures, and then compilers.
Gotcha.
And so compilers was a very much like a door opener to a lot of like places. Whereas like everywhere where I actually got an interview, they would ask about that. It's like, okay, so tell me what it was like writing your own compiler. And it was, I think, of a class of, there was probably 16 students in it, and I think 5 of them passed, kind of thing.
Oh wow!
Like it was not an easy class. But
so
it's like
developers. It's a good course to take.
Yeah, and it's like, so there, like the computer graphics was interesting, but it wasn't like I'm not a graphics engineer. Like I don't think that way. But like the compiler and like slowly building a project bigger and bigger and bigger over the course of the semester. Toward the end of it, I was basically working on it 40 hours a week, like while doing the rest of my course load. So it was like, it was great, and it was a phenomenal, like I said, door opener to like talk to other programmers, and they're like, okay, like he actually kind of understands what he's doing versus like the people who fail the FizzBuzz interview question kind of thing.
Yeah.
Early on, is AAA something that you knew you wanted to go for, like right out of the gate, or was it more like keeping an options open kind of thing? Like, is that ultimately like where you wanted to end up, was in AAA development, or was that just, did you always have in your mind like something that's something that could happen?
That's a good question. I don't think I thought about that exactly. I mean, this was 2014 when I was graduating. So I think like Braid had come out. There was already some indie games coming, like Fez and that, like that little indie scene that started up. But in my mind, I didn't consider myself having the skills necessary to create something like that from scratch. So I was like, I need to be around people who make games so I can learn from them. And I also want to create experiences like I experienced in Dragon Age. Like that would, like, ultimately I would have tried to go and work for BioWare. Like that was kind of like the dream when I first started, when I went back to school. And then, they never looked at me.
BioWare had some bangers back in the day, that's for sure.
Yeah. It was probably providential I didn't get in there though, because their bangers have
fizzled.
Been really not great the last 10, 15 years.
Yeah, no, definitely not. So in between this time period before, so was Carbine your first AAA studio that you worked on?
Yeah, that was my first game job.
What between starting out developing stuff, talking to other developers, and just doing like small stuff, experiments, and Carbine, like, what did that path look like to wind up at Carbine?
So I continued to intern as web dev a couple around, and one summer in 2012, one of my friends who my coworkers who went to PAX had seen Carbine's. They had just announced, or they just shown up and had a little playable demo at the convention, and so he's a big fan of like Pixar. He's a designer. He's like so big fan of like well-designed characters and stuff. And so he was like, "Hey, this MMO, you like MMOs? This new MMO I saw, Wildstar. You should check it out." And so I ended up joining their community. Like they had there's a fan site called WildstarCentral.com. Went on there and started posting on the forums. There was an IRC channel, which the David Bass, who is the not the senior community manager, but one of the community managers, hung out in. So I was like hanging out in there, and then that slowly other devs started jumping into this IRC channel. So I got to like ask the lead network engineer questions. I got to ask, stuff like that. And then in February 2013, I got invited an all expense paid trip down to visit the studio.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And they showed off, like, we got to play around with it, and they showed off a bunch of things. It was wonderful. And so then I got to like actually get to meet some devs and talk face to face. And then after like a month after that, they asked me to come and with a couple other people come and volunteer at PAX. PAX, it was called Prime back then, but Seattle. So I got to go and basically meet a whole bunch of people. I still have the dev shirt that's like Wildstar dev team. I was like a baseball tee.
That's awesome.
That is really cool.
And so I got to do that. And that's when I met other engineers and stuff like that. And they knew I was graduating in 2014. They knew that I was very interested in the game. And so that kind of led into this, hey, like I'd like to apply for a position. And because I had face-to-faces, that's really the only reason I think I had my resume looked at. So,
oh, wow.
Sometimes it's who you know.
Yeah, for sure.
So. And
networking is so important.
Yeah, don't neglect it. Like, who cares if you got in just because it's someone you know?
Yeah, that's something that I always think about in the back of my head. Like, it's like you know a guy or two, and it's just like, do you ask them? You know what I mean? Like, but at the same time, it's like, why would you not take advantage of something like that? It's not like you're only, if you're friends with somebody, it's not like you're only friends with them because they have a connection,
right?
But I think a lot of people miss out on a lot of stuff because they're too afraid to ask and what that's like. So that's always good. Were there so Wildstar, I don't know much about the game's development. I know about the game.
Yeah.
But I forget if there were ex-Blizzard employees that worked on Warcraft that worked on Wildstar.
It was started by a group, I think it was like 17 employees from Blizzard. Sometime 2004 or 5. Left Blizzard there, and a lot of them were from the Warcraft team, and they went and started Wildstar.
I always thought Wildstar was good. I never played it, unfortunately. I should have.
Yeah, most people didn't.
Yeah, I wanted it to. I don't know what. I think Warcraft was just too big of a juggernaut at that point when Wildstar was there. Wildstar
released in 2014.
Gotcha.
There's like the opening zones were really, really good. The end game zones were very sparse. They only had 3 dungeons on launch. They made them heroic too, though, so like the difficulty would be there for like level 50s. But like there wasn't a lot of variety in terms of like after you play through, like you're like, okay, I can just keep on running the exact same dungeon over and over again.
Gotcha.
The raids were great, but there was only 2 of them at launch, and they were very, very, very difficult.
Very difficult.
So like the player base just started dwindling and dwindling. And when you spend 10 years in development, you need to make like $300 million. And they didn't.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's insane. Yeah, that is actually kind of sad too, because I remember seeing like early previews and stuff like that for that game. I thought it was going to be something a little bit better. Unfortunately, it's difficult too, I guess, as a developer, if you're just like working on a project and stuff like that, and you don't have that much say. I don't know how much of a say like at Carbine, like just not a whole lot. It was always the top people making all the decisions. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I literally started the week we launched.
Yeah, gotcha.
And so it was like very, very much the most junior developer they had on the project. And then like 6 months in, they moved me from, I was a build engineer for the first 6 months, and then they moved me over to AI. And then they had some layoffs happen. Like I think about 10% of the company was laid off at that time. And then we were gearing towards like a free to play launch. And so I got moved over to the gameplay combat team. And then free to play happened, and 70% of us got laid off. I was a part of that one. And so it's like you get moved around, and so suddenly, like as you go been there for a year and a half, you have more say. But it's still like I remember getting into an argument with one of the designers who had been there for I think 7-8 years, And I was just like, I don't think we should do it this way. And he's like, I don't care. We're going to do it this way. And it's like, it ended up not being bad, but it just like, it was like, I was like, I just know okay, this is my place kind of thing.
Yeah. I understand.
Like there's a hierarchy like that.
Yeah. And I don't necessarily think it's necessarily a bad thing, because you want to have, you can't design by committee everything, right? You need to have someone making decisions and doing something like that. So, I don't really hold any ill will towards it. It was just like, oh, okay. Like, yeah, all right, we'll do it your way then.
Was it, in terms of starting at Carbon, was it like in your life, was it like a big change of careers for you? And did that weigh on you before jumping in?
I mean, I never thought that I was going to get in. Like, it was a pipe dream kind of thing. Felt like I had a 1,000,000 to 1 chance kind of thing. So, I mean, you jump in at launch, I was working 60 to 70 hours almost immediately.
Oh, wow.
And we had set up our branches, not great. I'm trying to do it in a relatively non-technical way. Basically, it was less branches and more like a linear structure of development time. So it was like a live branch, a staging branch, and then the development branch. And it was very difficult to bring bugs up to staging and then to live, which was my job. Because I was the build engineer, I was pulling in changes and stuff like that. Very difficult to do that without bringing other things. So like bugs would be fixed in a build, but we wouldn't be able to patch that bug fixed for like 3 months. Because of how it had to go through that process.
That's interesting.
It was and so then we swapped it up right before free to play. But I don't think we quite had the goodwill of the player base that we should have.
Yeah,
I'm kind of horrible.
Like a bureaucratic slog.
Yeah. It's almost like the person who set it up didn't think about a live service game when he set it up. It probably works very well for single player, like release it and like, okay, like if we have to patch it, we can do it kind of thing. But when you're like, we have to get changes out quickly on hot fixes and stuff, it's
not the way. Yeah.
Yeah. So describe, okay, so you talked a little bit earlier about some of your early days, like when you first started, like just during like the launch period. How was it? How did you feel after your first like few weeks working in AAA? Let's say like your first month or two even. Like how did what were your expectations going in versus like 90 days later you're like, oh boy.
Did you know you were going to go in 60, 70 hours a week? And
yeah, I definitely knew that. Like I was actually like crunch and overworking doesn't bother me too much. Like I said, like the Masters of Doom id, I mean, they were basically working nonstop. There was break and they would do D&D and they would go on the lake, but it was like whenever they were awake, they were churning. So I was hoping for like to be surrounded by people that were passionate like that. So my first like letdown was going and talking to people who have been working on this game for a while and just not feeling any, we'll call it joy or passion for the product that I had. There are a bunch of them that I talked to that were like, yeah, this is like a stepping stone in my career. Like what I really want to work for is, I want to work at Firaxis or I want to work at Gearbox or something like that. And I was like, well, why don't you go work for there? It's like, well, they wouldn't hire me. This was the only place that would hire me. And I understand that, but it's like, there was like this weird feeling of you're surrounding yourself with people who aren't passionate about the product. And you're like, oh, okay, this is people don't care as much as I do.
Yeah.
That hurts too. That hurts creativity. Even if when you're just around that kind of energy, that totally, I go, oh man, I don't know if I can do that.
Yeah, creativity feeds creativity.
Right. And yeah, so that was probably one of the first things I realized. And then the second one was for a build engineer job. I was like, I could have been doing this 5 years ago. Like, this is not a difficult job. It's like none of the skills that I learned going back to school, like all of them were far more advanced than what I'm doing now.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember being very frustrated with that. So when I got moved over to AI, it felt like, okay, this is when my career actually started. It's like I started learning very specific things, Visual Studio debugging tricks that like, I was like, oh, okay, now I'm actually like learning things of how things work. How I think the AI guy that I was learning from worked on Fallout 1 and 2, I think, back in the day. And so he was like well-versed, understood things, and was a phenomenal teacher. And so I was like, that was when I was like, okay, like I feel like I'm actually like learning from a dev versus just, pushing paper around.
That's excellent, actually, especially when you've got talent like that, that grew up and worked in an era that was just a lot different, where they had more passion. Like, you talk about that, where they were, I mentioned this in the other interview, with Jonathan Blow, is that you could tell when the developer, when they're working on the game, when they're fans of the game that they're working on, and you could feed off of that. Mm-hmm. And even players could feel that too. Yeah. If you're playing a video game, you could totally tell if the developers are fans of the game that they're making. That is something. So would you say, like, when you first started working in like the AI, going from build to AI, is that when you felt a little bit more like the magic start kicking in? I guess you could say.
Yeah. I remember texting some friends back in Idaho and being like, oh, I'm a game dev kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Like suddenly it hit me like, oh, I'm actually working in game development now. And not that, like, build is very important. And I appreciate all the build engineers. It's just like, I was not exactly what I wanted to do.
Yeah. Didn't click in the same way.
Yeah.
You wanted to work
on C++ code. I mean, what is this?
Yeah.
Does it count?
You want to work on the game stuff, and I totally understand that. Starting to wrap up on AAA stuff. What major lessons did you learn while working at Carbine that were like unexpected? Any lessons in AAA, like things that were like unknowns that you didn't expect, that you either had to know or that actually happened in game dev? Anything like that sticks out to you, like, wow, this is weird, or just unusual, or I had no idea this was a thing?
It wasn't so much a Carbine. I mean, like, the problem is, so my career went from Carbine to a startup. They called themselves indie, probably be technically AA kind of thing. Like, that was the quality they were going for. Mm-hmm. It's called Frostkeep Studios. And interesting thing about Frostkeep was that all three of the guys who founded it worked on the original World of Warcraft. They were on Team 1. They also all three worked at Carbine. I had met one of them, then two of them had jumped over to Riot and worked on League of Legends for a few years. And so, like, these people were very, very experienced, very talented, wonderful people. And but like hearing the stories about pre-Jordan Carbine, because they had all experienced it, I was like this whole, like, how the management worked. Apparently there was like a very I wouldn't say schizophrenic, but like no one had any idea what was going on.
Everything's scattershot, basically.
Yeah. And like they would, like, allegedly they would promise, oh, we're going to make a point and click MMO, like more like tab targeting and vanilla WoW. Oh, no, we're going to make an action MMO, which is what it turned out to be. It's like, when you bring people in and promise them one thing, and then, like, it was a complete clusterfuck from the beginning, apparently. And so it's like there was a realization that's like of who. It's not even who you attach your star to, kind of thing, but it's just like it's less about the company. It's like more about who do you trust working alongside. And so so I worked at Carbine, then Frostkeep, and then quit Frostkeep, and then took a couple year hiatus, and then got back and worked at an Exile for one of my close friends from Carbine. And I was like, it's like, who do I know that he's going to make the best decisions, both for me and for the game? And I can sit there and be like, I'm just going to do my work because I trust that, the design decisions coming from above aren't pants on head retarded. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of them are.
Yeah, that's something else too about having people that you work with, especially in management, that you trust the decisions that they're making, right? Because you need a good leader that's able to, that knows how to lead, number one, but also that is not going to give you any bullshit. That's not going to be like, oh, everything's fucking perfect, guys, and everything's great. It's not going to lie to your face about what is actually happening in their decisions and stuff like that. So it's really, that's also another thing is critically important in development too. Is when you have a good leader, someone that you understand and can definitely trust. That is incredibly important. A lot of people don't even think about that aspect of it a lot of times.
Yeah, sometimes who you work with can make or break the entire experience.
For sure.
Yeah, 100%.
What was the hardest part about all that, like working in a AAA environment? What do you think was the hardest part?
Like both Carbon and NXL have similar difficulties. I've watched good people leave companies because their opinion was, we'll call it squashed, and their correct opinion, like they were correct in their assessment of how like some section of the game was or something like that, and then would get like not a bad skill review, but like a bad people review, like the performance review is like skills are great, people skills are not, and that would mean like not set up for promotion. So it goes back to the management thing again. It's like you want it's so I mean it's every company, you have to play politics kind of thing.
Yeah,
that's an unfortunate truth.
and I like I've worked for myself for the last year and a half now. I'm trying to start building up a team for the next project. And it's like, and very much the thing is like, hey, like disagreements are going to happen. But we also like, it's similar to a marriage. It's like, we're on the same side. We're just trying to like figure out the best way to approach this versus my way. And I don't care.
Yeah. No one's ever.
Sorry, Joe.
No, go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was just going to say communication has to flow both ways.
Right.
Yeah. No one's ever going to agree on anything, whether it's someone you love or someone you hate. Like you're going to have disagreements about things, arguments and stuff like that. But trust and like what Anna was saying is that those are critically important. What was the easiest part about working in that atmosphere? There's probably go. I got to let you.
Yeah. Frostkeep was probably the most fun I've had working in game dev, at least for the first year. It was probably the most closest to the id lake house thing. Like there's 4 of us. Then we added a 5th a couple months later. And it was like all in the same room. Someone would turn around from their computer and be like, what do we do here? And we would like put our heads together and then come up with some sort of solution and move on, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So rapid iteration, a lot of fun. But probably overall the easiest thing has been just, it's honestly going to work every day is like the easiest thing in the world, just to be like, oh, I don't sit there and have to dread walking into work.
Yeah.
And like, and as soon as it started happening, which is like a tail end of Frostkeep, I quit because I've been working an exorbitant number of hours on that game, and my personal life was falling apart.
Gotcha.
And it's like, so very difficult for me to walk away, but it was like, this is the right thing I had to do. It's like to, save my marriage and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was like, and I knew like we had just curbed the hours. So we only had to work 40 hours a week.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, and I did that for like a week, and then I started feeling myself like, nope, I'm working more. I got to keep on like more each time. And it's like, if I didn't come in early enough, I might miss an important discussion about how something's going to work. And so it was like, I decided to quit. And so it was like the easiest thing of my entire career has just been like, it's really nice to look forward to going to work every day.
Yeah.
So that was like oh, sorry, go on, Anna.
I'm just going to say, when you love what you do, it really can turn a job into a passion.
Yeah, it makes a big difference. Makes a big difference. I think Jonathan Blow mentioned like before about how he likes people that love working like 12, 14 hours. when you're really, really passionate about something and you believe in it, that's actually really easy to do, because I've done that before where I've just like coded literally like all day long and I'm like, wow, I forgot to eat like 3 times already. But that's the thing. But yeah, so you think that that was like the moment, just that whole vibe there towards the end, like that was probably the single moment that made you say, screw it, I'm done.
Yeah, it was. There's also like a looking around and being like, okay, I'm very, I don't know if it's lucky or particular, but I've only worked on projects that I've wanted to work on so far.
Mm-hmm.
Like thankfully I haven't had to do the whole, we're making this, mobile game as a side thing. Like, I don't know, it's like nothing against mobile games. I just don't want to work on them. And it's like, and I'm very lucky that like I haven't had to rely on just getting a job to pay the bills. So it's like when in 2020, that was 2017, late 2017, when I walked away, and I was like looking at the landscape and I was like, there's no games that I want to work on. Like there's no games I want to work on that I can also guarantee that like aren't going to destroy my personal life in the same way. And so I was like, okay, well, I guess the games industry, I gave it a good run, 3 years, it's time for me to get out. and honestly thought I was never going to go back. And then 2019, my wife and I moved to Tennessee. World of Warcraft Classic came out, and so I started playing games. I was like, because I stopped playing games for a couple of years too. Like I started playing golf instead, and that was my addiction.
That was fun.
I love golf still. And so I started playing games again. And I was like, oh, okay. Like I remember this feeling. I remember what this is like. I'm like starting up my passion again. And then COVID happened, and the entire industry went remote. And so I reached out to friends, and I was like, hey, I'm not a great stay-at-home dad. Like, because I was a stay-at-home dad. I was like, I'm not very good at this. Can I do remote work? And like the couple friends I reached out to were like, not right now, kind of thing. And then like a month later, one of them reached back out and was like, absolutely, we need help. Okay. And so, yeah.
That's good. And that puts you on your current trajectory that you're on right now.
That got me into InXile and working fully remote for the last, for them until 2023.
So, go on. You gonna say something, Anna?
No, I just said nice.
Oh, sorry. So like what lessons, if we could do this too, where you're at right now currently. So from moving from that AAA environment to now, what lessons or habits that you like brought with you from AAA, and do they fit in indie space? Because I know there's obviously a lot of crossover, but is there anything in particular that kind of like sticks out where it's just like they did things this way in AAA and in indie it's this way, but is there anything that you saw that was a benefit from AAA that works also good with indie development?
There's so many crossovers. It's hard for me to like say like this thing was really good. One thing I have noticed for myself, and I don't know how many other indie devs do, is like I use a project management tool.
Yeah.
I don't use Jira. Everyone hates Jira except for producers. But like in version control and stuff like that. And so I have this like a system of like, okay, like checking things in on a semi-regular basis. So I'm not sitting there, something goes wrong, I can always roll back if I need to. And so there's like certain systems in place that are just from a production standpoint that I think that a lot more the indies could probably do a little better, that most of the successful ones probably already are. But it's like the hobbyist, like even if you're a hobbyist, it's not like I perforced onto my other computer right over there. Like is just having it in a different location, so it's not like this isn't the only copy kind of thing. But one of the biggest not lessons, mentalities I learned was actually since I worked remote at InXile, like I was contracting for them, and it's like, start work at 9 and work at 5, and you really focus the whole time. Like, I get distracted with, Twitter and YouTube and stuff like that if it takes too long to compile. But the amount of work I was getting done at InXile was, at least 2 or 3 times what other people were getting on my team, because I was so focused on this. And that translates over very easy to when you go and like, I'm going to be a solo dev for a little bit. It's like, you're not sitting there waiting for a producer to be like, hey, work on this. It's just, you know, you're already in this kind of grind mindset.
Yeah, actually, you just answered my next question. I was going to ask you about like workflows and stuff like that. See, I'm a great interviewer. You know what I mean? I lead. I'm so good at what I do. That's why I'm here, guys. So, is there anything you miss about AAA development? Now that you're going, that you went solo, and what you're doing right now? I just banged the mic. I'm sorry.
Oh yeah. I mean, there's like it is easier in some ways, where it's like I just did my task. And then I can hand this off to an artist or something like that, and they get to make it look pretty. Or something like it is very nice to be able to hand it off to this project, this system off to somebody else to actually do the work. So I've created it. Now you fill out all the data fields and stuff like that. Yeah. I don't have to worry about that. So it's in a way it's kind of simpler that way. But probably the bigger thing that I missed, and I don't think it's an exclusive to AAA, but more of a problem with solo dev. And Anna, you kind of touched on it earlier. Is like I've started calling it creative escalation, where it's like I come up with an idea, my coworker then thinks about it and says, "Oh, it would be cool if this," and you come up with an idea, and then cooler if this, and then I come back and it's cooler with this, and another guy comes back and it's cooler, and like you get better and better and better, and suddenly a good idea becomes a pinnacle idea. And it's, I think remote work doesn't quite give that either. But it's very difficult to do that solo, because I would sit there and get the thing done, like an item created or something like that, and be like, oh, this will be cool. Put it in, I'm like, well, that's it. I'll move on to the next one.
That's no one to talk to about it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's something else too. That's the one thing that, I mean, I'm really good at working solo, but at the same time, there is that aspect when you're working with someone. But even like you said, in person, I think is definitely better than doing it remotely, because you could just, I don't know, I'm not all woo-woo, but you can feel someone else's energy. You know what I mean? And when they're having a good day and a bad day, and when they come up with a creative idea, because it might be the excitement in their voice, and particularly body language, because that doesn't really come across all that well over video, because normally we just see like a headshot. We don't get to see, how's their body, is their body position relaxed, excited, are they vibrating because they have an awesome idea?
Are they wearing pants?
Yeah, well, that's important. I'm not wearing any right now. No, just kidding. It's just underwear. All right. So, what issues are like? Are there any roadblocks when transitioning over to do your own thing? Anything that like sticks out to you? Did you find anything? Like, obviously, we're just talking about this as well with working with other people and vibing off of them. But any other like roadblocks that you didn't expect going indie?
That was the biggest one, where I was like surprised at how difficult the creative process is for me. I'm a little bit more extroverted than the average programmer, so it's like it's very odd for me to sit there and be like, I'm just going to sit there and like, this is my screen, like this is my place kind of thing. And so it's like not having like someone to converse with is probably the most difficult aspect for me, at least, of going into solo dev. It's like, so it's like that surprised me more than I was expecting, because I've been working remote, and it's like, but even those small meetings where it's like, oh, I'm not alone kind of thing. So it was nice when like Oracle Melius was getting closer to the end, and people in the Discord community were finally like responding to things, be like, oh, hey, here's a good idea. Why don't we try this? Like, have you thought about doing this? And it's like, I could get like more rapid feedback with people who were interested in what the game was actually doing and stuff. But early on, it's kind of like wandering a desert. You're like, I have to come up with my own water.
Yeah, because it's amazing when you can get feedback, and there's something to be said too about how it feeds your own excitement when you have people to talk to about your project with.
Yeah,
exactly.
For sure. Yeah, I was gonna ask, but this once again, I'm so amazing. We already answered the questions. No, but I can imagine doing that, because I've never worked in a large environment like that before. I've always worked solo, or I've done like contract work for other people, slinging some code here and there, which is a majority of my work. So I don't have any kind of experience with that, working in those environments with other people. But I imagine it was almost like like chess, for example. It's like, you know the rules, you know how the board's laid out, you know all that stuff, but now you're just kind of like playing the game by yourself. You're familiar with everything, but you also don't know how to go about it like right away. Is that kind of how it was too? There was a little bit of, wow, I have all this freedom, I could do whatever I want. But it's also like, wow, I literally do whatever I want, but it's different when you're by yourself after you were working with other people, I think.
Yeah, I mean, there's a little bit of excitement right now. And you're like, I can do whatever I want, and you just start checking code in, and like you don't have to get a producer to sign off on it, and you don't have to get the lead designer. And you're like whatever I think up can come up. And then after about a month, you're like, I can't think anything else up.
Yeah.
Come on, Juices. Like, where are you?
Yeah, I could totally see that. 'Cause I'm the same way. Sometimes I got my list of stuff to do and my project management. And if I'm done with something, I'll move it to an archive. But then it's like I'm looking at my list and I'm like, some days it's like, what should I tackle next? Like, I don't know what the right thing is to tackle next. Like right now I'm to the point where like on what I'm working on, like all the major systems are done. So now I'm working on testing art. And it's just like, I can draw. I'm actually a pretty damn good artist. I just hate drawing. So I loathe this part of the work. And so I've been constantly moving it down my list of when to start it and test it so I could do all this other stuff. And now I'm like, I literally damn near made all the systems in the game already. It's just like, I need art for this now. But yeah, no, I could totally get that. Couple easy ones for you. Like the hardest part for you about solo indie dev, just indie development in general. Like what is the hardest part?
I mean, marketing is going to be up there. Like, I have no idea how that works, how it's supposed to work. I understand a lot of like I think his name's Chris Slazoziak or something like that. Is that he does a great like email list and talking about Steam wish lists and stuff like that. Thomas Brush like has like a lot of stuff about this, and I appreciate what they say. I don't necessarily agree with all of it. But then again, Thomas has made a successful game and I haven't. So, what do I know?
But I mean, yeah, no, I totally get that for sure. Because I was going to ask you also, having released your own game, Oracle of Malaise, from like the development to Steam publishing and stuff like that, like what was the process? What was that? Just tell me about that process in general before we get into specifics.
Well, I will say, I knew kind of from early on, I was not expecting the game to sell super well. Like I can't draw. It's not that I don't even like drawing. It's like I can't draw. And so a lot of lessons learned along the way about like, okay, bring an artist in earlier to help me out kind of thing, get a more cohesive art direction, more cohesive palette and stuff like that. So there's a lot of things like that went wrong along the way. But I will say like, there was this weird moment, like when I basically clicked, Steam allows you to, up to 2 weeks before you're allowed to change your release date. And I had to push my release date back. I was originally going to do on the 9th of January, and then it had to be pushed back to the 21st because of some art assets I was waiting on. But I remember like the day before, and I was like, I can push this and I can delay it again. And if I don't, it's going to get released. And then the day it released, I remember like is almost this feeling of like sadness that like, oh, this is going out now. Like people are actually going to see this. It reminded me a little bit of like turning in a thesis paper back in school and being like, but you don't know what the rubric is. You don't know if the professors are going to like it at all. Like I worked hard on it, but I can see every single flaw in this. And so it's like this feeling of, joy of like, I did something that I started out to do. And this sadness because it's like, it's not as good as I could have made it. Like, and even like with my, like, obviously there's like growth and stuff like that, but like, even with my current skills, like I could have worked harder. I could have done things a little bit better 6 months ago than the game would have been so much better. Mm-hmm. And it's like, that's such a weird, odd feeling. And I don't know if I answered your question, but
no, that makes sense. There was an interview I was watching, not a game developer. It was the sound designer behind Star Wars movies, the prequels.
Okay.
And he was talking And I remember it was like a half-hour episode, so they were going like through all like the sound design stuff and how much of laser shots do we put in this scene and this, that, and the other. And he said something I thought was really good and interesting. And he said this could be applied to everything and not just movies. He said, but movies are never finished; they slip through your fingers. I imagine that's something a lot like games too, because you could spend forever working and polishing a video game, but at some point, no matter what flaws you see in it, you're gonna have to let it out there. And it's one of those things where it's never finished. It's just it's just released.
Yeah, I'd say all art has that same aspect to it, where the artist can continue polishing it, but eventually you have to give it to the public.
Yeah,
because that's what art's for.
That's something that's difficult, I believe, for a lot of people, especially if you're solo and not working, because someone has to make that decision. And when you're solo, it's hard to make that decision to do. Which goes into my next question, which you already answered. I was gonna ask if there's any process or area that you thought you'd like to improve upon for your next game.
Yeah, like the art direction is a thing, and like I said, I've tweeted out some concept art already of the next project.
I saw those on Twitter. Look awesome.
And so I'm very excited about the direction we're going. But it's like it was the realization of like I really screwed up by not bringing someone, because my original thought was if you've ever watched I think the YouTube channel's name's Crowbcat, yeah. And he did a YouTube. It was Back 4 Blood shows that Left 4 Dead 2 was carried by Valve, I think was the title of it. And there's a section in there where it's talking about discussing Valve's mentality towards like early development, and they basically just gray boxed a couple sidewalks and streets, put some zombies in there, and said, "Is this fun?" And when it was fun, then they continued. And I was like, okay, that's what I'm going to do. I don't need an artist yet. I don't need an artist, right from the get-go. I can work on systems. I can make if I can make a square shooting fun, then the art will follow, kind of thing. And I think that it's still true if you have if you know what artist you're going to get or something like that. Whereas what ended up happening was I spent 2 or 3 months like working on items, figuring out some systems and stuff like that. And it was fun. And then I was like, okay, it's been 3 months, time to find an artist. And I couldn't find one.
Oh, wow.
It's like, and all the good ones that I would find, like you go to Unity Asset Store and you're like, I like your style. Can you make something for me? And they're like, well, I'm booked up for like 9 months.
Wow.
And I'm like, I know that. It's like, okay, I reached out to a friend of mine who is an illustrator and did animation for the Netflix series Hello Ninja.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like any possibility? He's like, look, I'm booked up for the next year. Like I have no time. And I was like, okay. So then it started going, be like, I can't find an artist at all. And so I ended up finding one through a connection through church. But he can only work on it, 5-10 hours a week around his kids and his regular work. And so you end up in this situation of like, I'm relying on someone doing this part-time. So it's hard to get like nail down certain things. So a lot of the animations feel pretty floaty, and it's not his fault. I think he did a great job. But it's just iteration. That's iteration time. That if he had been there from the beginning of the project and been able to work, 20 hours a week on it or something like that, would have been much, much simpler. And the game would have been much better for that.
Yeah, no, that's it takes a lot of effort to go through the entire process of, design, production, implementation, and like release and stuff like that. Like people don't realize like how big of a deal that is just to release a game. I think like some statistic is like 99% of all games that are being developed aren't released. That's insane to think about. I don't know if that's the exact statistic, but I remember it being just incredibly high that most people, they start on a project and they just always can them.
I can't wait for that statistic to be quoted by everyone around me. Like, well, I heard it on the Game Den podcast.
Yeah, by that one idiot Jack, whatever he said. He's so smart. So what is your So what were you saying? Sorry,
I was just gonna say I have an easy time believing it. It's hard to let your art see the world and get judged,
especially if you work on just like a bunch of small stuff to test things out to see how they are. You're obviously going to can ideas. It's like, how much do you go through before you find something that actually sticks that you want to like work on and stuff? That's entirely different. So on what's your current temperature? Like, what's your current read on like AAA and indie development? Having worked across like the spectrum, like where do you find the culmination of everything so far? Like, where did you find the most enjoyment?
Most of my enjoyment comes from indie games now. Lethal Company has been always a fun one with my gaming friends. And generally I'll pick up like I recently jumped into Dot Age for a little bit. And like, so generally I'll pick that up, and it's hard to tell exactly why. I have a lot of like theories, but it's like I don't think any one particular reason says this is why I don't enjoy AAA games as much anymore. Elden Ring was probably the last AAA, and even they are kind of considered AA by a lot of people. I don't know exactly why, but yeah, most like the way that most AAA games come out, it seems like a flashy puddle. It's like could be a mile wide, but it's like there's an inch deep. And the worst part is an overemphasis on not juice, but like particles and graphic fidelity. And you just don't see what's going on as much anymore.
Everything feels very conveyor belt coming out of the AAA, coming out of the space these days.
So I think one of the reasons for that is actually, and people blame Unreal for that. I don't think that's completely fair. It's true. But you have, Unreal 5, came out 3-4 years ago, and Unreal 4 was introduced as a, you could download the source code, I think back in 2015 or 16, because we used that on Frostkeep. And, but when part of the problem is that you have studios who are moving over to Unreal, like Bethesda, In Exile is moving into Unreal, I think Obsidian has, I'm not sure. Instead of using their own proprietary engines, and like understanding of how these engines work is like no one has like a really deep understanding except for maybe Epic, and they're doing Fortnite and stuff like that. And Fortnite looks much better than a lot of AAA games.
Yeah.
And so you have like these. And the reason why I think a lot of studios are moving into that Unreal is because of job hopping. It's like, it's much easier to plug and play someone into the same engine, slightly different code base, but it's the same, program stuff, like systems in there. And they can go, okay, you came from Obsidian coming over to Bethesda, we're working in the same engine. You won't have as much of a ramp up speed as like it used to be with like BioWare coming into Activision or something like that.
Yeah.
And so there's like people are doing that partially because people are moving around jobs so much. And then I don't know if y'all have looked at like Unreal tutorials in a long time. But they're very skin deep also. Yeah. It's like there's not really any information there. It's like you can get almost that much by reading the documentation.
Yeah.
And it's like, and so I think part of the problem is like people are trying to learn these engines and not diving into them. And then you end up like everything looking the same because somebody made a tutorial that said, hey, this is how you're supposed to do it. And so everyone just kind of follows that tutorial, not thinking about what will actually happen with it.
Yeah. There wasn't a Brackeys for Unreal, I don't think. No. So is there anything in terms of like the industry, like, is there anything that you think that AAA could learn from indies and that indies could learn from AAA?
Yeah, I would say AAA studios need to greatly reduce scope. It's something that every indie knows. We have to reduce, but AAA's like they'll talk about it and like, well, we have to cut this kind of thing. But it's like there's and at Frostkeep we called it pixel fucking, where it's like you sit there and you make sure every pixel is in the exact right space, and it's like 90% of the pixels don't actually matter that much, because you're like the player's going to see them and they're not going to really care.
Yeah.
And so I think that companies could move faster, and then take more risks because it would be cheaper if they're willing to be like, hey, 90% or 80% is good enough, and then we can go back to it if we need to, kind of thing. And I think one of the problems that you're running into is that, well, so many individual devs, like I said, are looking at every single company as like a stepping stone. So they can be like, well, I made my thing perfect, so that will get me a job at the next company. You know, it doesn't matter if the gameplay was terrible. I made this animation look amazing. It's like, well, maybe part of the reason why the gameplay was terrible was because we spent so much time making sure that your animation looked good, and less time like resources on making the gameplay good. Like everything is a cost. Like there's a give and take in game dev that I think individual developers have forgotten. The indie devs understand inherently because they have to.
Yeah.
And I think that indie devs, like, let's see, what could indie devs learn from AAA?
Nothing. They suck. No, just kidding. Just kidding. Sorry.
Honestly, I'm not sure. It's like it's like what can it feels like you can have a lot of, like, if you look at the films industry, and it's like, I guess just as a parallel, like what can blockbusters learn from indies? It's like the reason why they're indies is because they're doing differently than what blockbusters are doing. The reason why indie devs are doing this because they're doing differently. I think here's one thing. I think indie devs should stop chasing trends like they do. Like AAA does that a lot, and I think the indie devs are kind of falling into that trap. And it's partially because you read, is like, you know, like I was saying with Thomas Brush and Chris, they like figure out what your market is before you start your game. And there's good business sense to that, but we're indie devs, we're artists, right? We don't think about money.
Yeah, that's totally true. Well, you're an indie dev, so you actually have a real job. It's like, well, yeah. No, I could.
I think there's something where it's like, I think that was like Oracle Malaise was not my dream game. It was a game I was like, I think I can get this done in this amount of time. And I was wrong on some aspects, right on some other ones. It's like, but I was pretty accurate. It's like, but at the same time, it's like going back and you're like, hey, you know what? Here's a free license. Go and just make something that you really want to make. You know, versus like, well, should I do that, or should I go and just make a game and that I can get out? And I think I probably would have been like, no, like work on something you're actually like really, really, really want to make, and then figure it out from there. And that's, again, probably why 99% of indie games don't get released, though. So
yeah, that's the truth. All right, we're gonna be wrapping this up, so I got some questions for you. Just some general questions to end this. That really. All right, first, this is an important question. Everybody, understand this. Tabs or spaces? Settle it for us. Everybody else dies. Thank you so much. Everybody that uses spaces, sorry, that's it. You're done. You're done. You're ethered. You've been yeeted off the planet.
It's one of my favorite Silicon Valley episodes.
Yeah, tabs or spaces.
It's like when Richard finally gets a girlfriend and she uses spaces and he uses tabs.
Yeah, that's a deal breaker. Can't do that.
And I was watching with my wife and another couple, and both of the husbands were are programmers. And both the wives was like, why is this a big deal? And both of us just like turned like, what do you mean? Why is this a big deal?
Get out of my house. Why don't you understand? Yeah. Okay, good. So everyone hears this. I'm sorry, everyone that uses spaces, you're all dead. So, all right. So what advice would you give to all new indie devs that are trying to break into the industry?
Are they trying to break in as an employee or make their own game?
Make their own game. Or just in general, just like anybody that's an indie dev that wants to go into that space, whether it's for themselves or someone else.
If they're just in the aspiration phase.
Yeah.
Well, I think for like if you want to get a job for someone else, like there's two things I think you have to do, and the first one is work on your skills that make you valuable to that company or person, and then also like have a rapport with them, like talking about the networking thing. It's like it is much easier to get a job if you've interacted with somebody and you can show that you have the skills. And then they're like, well, yeah, it's like, it's hard to get a job if you just have the skills, hard to get a job if you just have the rapport. Like there's like, it's both things. But for someone who's like, I've always wanted to make games, I just want to make a game, like, just, you have to do it is really what it boils down to. It's like, it's, you know, I fell into the trap of like feeling like I had to go like through a certain process, get my computer science degree, then go into AAA, and that would teach me how to make my own games and stuff like that. Or, you know, I could end up working on a game I really like, a BioWare Dragon Age kind of thing. It's like, but if I had gone back to if I could teleport back and talk to myself in 2010, it would be like, no, go and learn Unity, because Unity, I don't think there was a license fee back in 2010. There might have been. I know there was for Unreal.
I don't recall.
But start using these third-party engines, because you don't want to be an engine program. So start using the third-party engines and learning that way, and just create stuff. Like, you know, put it on itch.io, put it on somewhere and get some feedback. We don't have Armored Games as much anymore, but like a lot of modern indie devs got their start on that. Go into Roblox. I know Roblox is weird with like, I think the FCC or something like that is after them for some reason. I don't remember. But like, you can go and create a game in Roblox and make money off of it right now. Like, there's a bunch of like multiverse style games like that, or companies like that, which you can go in and create your own game using all their assets, using all of this stuff, and potentially make some money off of it. And it can be a prototyping area. Yeah.
I hadn't thought about that either, using Roblox.
Yeah.
That's pretty good. What advice, is there any advice that you have for like seasoned developers in the AAA industry? Like, do you have any advice for the AAA industry other than do better? But is there any like one piece of advice?
As someone who wants to keep their job for retirement, or
just in general,
advice is keep your head down. Don't ruffle any feathers.
Yeah, always. But in terms of like the development aspects of it, is there anything that you think the AAA industry could benefit from the process?
I like, this is going to get me in some trouble. I look at the layoffs that happen, and I'm not surprised.
Right.
I think the AAA industry will probably needs to get leaner than it is right now. My own personal assessment of my skills is that I should be on the cusp. Like, I should be one of the worst developers that you have. And if I'm not one of the worst, then you guys need to hire better people. Because I'm not like a Carmack or Romero or all these phenomenal people. Like, I'm so far below them, kind of thing. And I can't tell why that happened. I don't exactly know what changed over the last 10 to 15 years of why that happened, but it has. It's like, money gets involved and stuff. But I would say, like, the motto we had at Frostkeep was A's hire A's, B's hire B's, C's hire C's, kind of thing. So you have to do your best to not bring in a B, because as soon as you bring in a B, they'll start recommending B's and below, and then as soon as you bring in a C, and the whole company just gets dragged down. And I think that's like, there probably needs to be fewer people working on a single game. And I'm going to get in trouble for that.
No, it's I think it's 100% true. There was it's not linear, and it's not exponential growth too. There's diminishing returns to it, right? So, like, if you have a team of 100 people, doubling it is not going to get you an extra 100% output. It's going to get you an extra 25% output. So that's a huge problem right there. Obviously, too many cooks in the kitchen, too many moving parts. It still is too hard, even with the proper management department heads. It is still too hard to get all those pieces lined up always perfectly. That's something that's going to be hard. But I think it was during like COVID and the lockdowns is when a lot of an explosion happened where like everyone was hiring everybody. And now we're seeing that shrink. And now I think a lot of people are getting laid off because of that. But I think you're absolutely right. I do think that there's a lot of fat that needs to be trimmed from AAA studios. They need to get back to just being fans of what they were working on in the first place.
Yeah. I would say another thing is that AAA could learn from indies more is like actually communicating with players.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Like
in a healthy way.
Yeah, in a healthy way.
Sure.
There should be mutual respect.
Yes. Well, it's like, and I don't understand that. I've seen it from coworkers and stuff where it's like players just don't know what they're doing, and like there's almost like this, and old school Blizzard was not old school, like 2009 Blizzard was one of the worst at it. Like they were very much we call ivory tower developers. Like we're up here, you're beneath our notice. Like not going to pay attention to really what you say because you don't understand it. Case in point was it John Brevik who said it's like you think you want classic but you don't. And then like 2 years later they bring it back. It's like, how do you have that mentality of not understanding why people want this? And it's insane to me that they just don't pay attention.
This is what all the fans are out there screaming, like, this is what we want. And they're all like, no, you don't. And it's like, really?
Yeah.
But there's more of us than there are of you. And we're telling you like what we want.
And it's like, they're paying your salary. Like,
yeah, that's something that I think that I see is a huge problem with the AAA industry is that they're high on their own supply. I think that's what it is. And hubris, I guess you can call it too, where we just know better. We than the consumer. Like, no, there's the phrase, the customer's always right. I know that's not 100% all the time, but that is still a very, very true statement. If it's just, you're just normal customer, they're usually going to be right. Like if something is bad.
Yeah.
I understand
there's a blog post I read, this was 15 years ago, about game design. And it was a guy who made like a very simple level-based like puzzle game where you move boxes to unlock things, like to get your pathway. And he put it out to send it off to his friends and family. And they responded back and be like, we want an undo button. And he's like the whole time saying like an undo button literally ruins everything about the game. It's like, I'm not going to give you an undo button. It's like, but it was probably 80 to 90% of the feedback was we want an undo button.
Wow.
So he finally went and watched somebody play and noticed that there was points because it was like they were like on islands and there was water and you had to move boxes around, and the boxes, you had to use the boxes, and the boxes could go in the water. And then they wouldn't be able to be accessed anymore. And so he watched that happen and was like, oh, they don't want an undo button. They want it not to go into the water. And so he basically said, prevent a box from going to the water. And suddenly no one asked for an undo button anymore.
Interesting.
Now, the player was right. Like, they are very good at giving you the problem. Be like, I'm stuck. There's a problem. Now it's up to the designer to be like, how do I solve this in a way that keeps the fun and maintains the cohesion of the game? It's like, so customers right. They don't, like, I always said is like the customer knows exactly what the problem is, has no idea what the solution is.
Very good.
Yeah, that's actually really, really good. I got to keep that in mind moving forward.
Yeah.
When if I ever release something and someone says something, I'm not just going to tell them to F off. I'll be like, well, I'll take a look at it, I guess. But go on, sorry.
I was going to say, it's hard to do if you don't watch someone actually play it, though. That's part of the problem.
Yeah. Watching other people play your game, I think, is critically important, too, to development, just the entire process, because you get to see how, because we've done this before, too, in other projects I've worked on where I've just dumped in like hundreds of hours playing, and then like my buddy will ask me so for like some better feedback, and I'm like, I don't know at this point. Like, because I know everything. I know exactly how the game plays. I know everything about it. Like, I can't tell if it's too hard or not. I can't tell if this is too easy or not, because I could just cruise through the game like while sleeping at this point. Yeah. And it's so watching other people and what they're struggling with, the issues that they're having, I think is critical. I think it's something that a lot more devs need to do.
That was something that happened to me was like I have like 180 hours in my game on Steam because like development, playing and stuff like that. And so I was like, had no idea what the difficulty spikes and stuff were. And my nephew came over for Christmas with his family, or my brother-in-law and his family. So my nephew's 15 years old, and I'd just gotten the game onto Steam Deck. And I was like, all right, here you go. And I handed him, I was like, let's see. And he actually played it for like 12, 13 hours. And I was like, nice. Oh, like I haven't made a horrible game. Like, now there are a couple of like problems like he was running into, and I had to like, I need a tutorial for this. Oh, I need to explain this better and stuff like that. But I was like, oh man, I didn't make this as bad as I thought it was, because like someone who never seen it before picks it up, it's hard to get it into people's hands without marketing, but picks it up and plays it. And it's like, I had fun with it. And I was like, this is a new feeling.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Yeah, that's something that's always that I'm afraid of. Put something in other people's hands.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, any parting words for any developers out there or just the people watching?
It is easier than you think to make games. It's also more difficult in other aspects than you think to make games. It's like, so I've told people it's more like a marathon than like anything else. It's like you make one little thing, next day you make another little thing, and eventually it'll add up. So keep pushing, stay
Little by
disciplined.
little. Stack those blocks.
Little by little. Yep.
That's the way to do it. Well, Jordan, thanks so much for coming on. Really appreciate you.
Thanks for having me. I enjoyed it.
All right, everybody. We'll catch y'all later. Peace.
Bye.